So let's get started and talk about Amplify Science just for grades K through 5. As a former elementary school teacher, I'm so excited to show this to you today. All right, first things first that you need to know about Amplify Science is our powerful partnership. So we have partnered up with the Lawrence Hall of Science at the University of California, Berkeley, to create Amplify Science. We, as Amplify, we knew we needed people who are really amazing authors and to create a program like Amplify Science. So we partnered with LHS, and they are people who have created amazing science programs for over 40 years, like FOSS, everything like that. They are really, really great at what they do. So we partnered with them in 2013 to create something really amazing for the next generation science standards. Before I move any further, I have a question for all of you. In the chat, could you put in a 1 for I really don't know anything about the next generation science standards, or up to a 5 if I could tell you everything that you need to know about the next generation science standards. Like, I'm an expert, I don't need you. Put in the chat just so I know what to share about NGSS. Awesome. Okay, I see all over the board. So that's great to hear. I see some 1s, see some 3s, I see a 4. I could probably learn from you at that point, but because we all are learning so much about this, because the LHS and Amplify Science, we created Amplify Science specifically for the next generation science standards, because this was a whole new way of thinking about science and teaching science content. Back in 2013, the NGSS were created, and it was a whole different way of looking at it. So they created these 3 dimensions, 3D learning about science content. So first we have core ideas. You could think of that as the content, what students are actually learning about, cross-cutting concepts, or you could think about the skills that they're learning. So how they're thinking. And then you can think about the practices. What are they doing? How are they acting like engineers? So thinking back to cross-cutting concepts, you could think of like, compare and contrast, similarities, things like that. But we had never had a program that actually addressed this way of teaching. So with the Lawrence Hall of Science, Amplify created Amplify Science as the very first program that was designed entirely for the next generation science standards from the bottom up, thinking about phenomena. What does that mean exactly? Let's think about that. So when we think about teaching phenomena, it's actually putting students in the role of scientists and allowing them to think about science content as things about them in the real world, asking questions and making sure that they are applying that knowledge and transferring it elsewhere. That's exactly what we do in Amplify Science, every single unit. Here's some examples. Oh my goodness. So within grades K through 5, this happens in every single unit. Students are going to take on the role of scientists, and then they're going to ask questions about the world around them. For example, in grade 1, students are going to be learning about plants and animal defenses, but how do they do that? They're going to ask questions and act as if they were marine scientists. In grade 4, we have a unit called energy conversions. They're not just doing anything. They're going to take on the role of systems engineers. And in grade 5, they're learning about ecosystem restoration, and they're going to actually act as if they were ecologists. We're going to dive into one specific unit later, and you're going to see exactly how this works. But when we think about this new way of learning, and I know a lot of districts out there are still transitioning to the next generation science standards or other standards that are similar to the NGSS, it might be overwhelming of thinking, oh, how can I actually teach this? And how can I do this so all of my students can access this? This sounds really rigorous. Well, Amplify Science was designed in a way that allows every single student to access this content with our do, talk, read, write, and visualize approach. So you might be thinking, oh, does this happen in every single lesson? Do they have a do? Do they have a talk? Do they have a read? This happens in different iterations every single lesson. They might have a lesson where they are doing something, they're doing something hands-on, and then they might have a lesson where they're doing a little bit more reading and writing that lesson. But this kind of approach allows every single student to access this content and do it in different ways so that they can transfer their learning elsewhere. And this is my favorite set of slides to the next 3 slides, because this really shows how this approach affects students. So you can see that they achieve more when they do it this way. Not only are they better at science content, but they're better at reading because they are allowing themselves to have better background knowledge by doing this kind of content. So you can see this is really amazing. I'll just stay here for a second and allow you to look at it. Okay. And then not only that, look at how much better they are at writing when they are creating actual arguments based on science content. They are allowing themselves to ask the questions, collect that evidence, and then create arguments and talk to each other about that. Students are able to work together to solve this problem. And you can see too, that allows not just every student, English language learners, and I was a former one myself. This is something that was really difficult for me in classes like science because of the vocabulary was really difficult to get to know. But in Amplify Science, real ELLs and other students like students with special disabilities, they are able to access anything that they need to. Awesome. But that sounds great, right? Look at all that amazing data. But actually, how do you do that? Let's check that out. Obviously, in every single lesson of Amplify Science, students are going to see teachers are going to have embedded differentiation, and we are going to have specific things for specific sets of students. Obviously, you know your students best, and you can do that with whatever you think will work, but students are able to interact with the lessons, and we really design it so that you know exactly what to do in any given moment. Awesome. So let's think about a unit itself, because it sounds great. And let's look at an example. We're going to dive deeper into some lessons in a second about this unit. But within balancing forces in grade 3, this is a unit where students have to think about force and motion and how that works in the world. So obviously, students have a lot of prior knowledge by 3rd grade, right? They know that a force is a push or pull between two objects, but they need more than that. They need to actually do some hands-on learning. They need to move things around, shake things up. They need to read some rigorous texts, right? And then what happens? After they do that, they know that forces between two objects can be touching or non-touching. They might have not have known that previously. And now, after working together, solving the problem, they know that more than one force can act on an object at the same time. You're going to see exactly what happens in that unit, so I don't want to give too much away. How else? Obviously, you're looking for assessments, right? In every single unit of Amplify Science, there's going to be a pre-assessment right at the beginning, and there's going to be an end of unit assessment, right? But that can't be enough, right? We need some formative assessments in there as well. So think of on-the-fly assessment as quick checks. So you're walking around seeing how students are doing. Self-assessments, that's really important for metacognition, right? Students need to know exactly how they think that they're doing in a lesson. Then you have some talk-based checks. Those are particularly for some younger grade bands, K through 2, where you walk, K through 1, excuse me, where you're walking around, seeing what they're doing. You just talk to them, see how that's working. Critical juncture assessments, these are once per chapter, and they are really allow you to see how students are doing before moving on. And in middle school, we have very specific lessons called critical juncture assessments, and K-5, they're just going to be embedded throughout lessons. All right. So let's think about the pacing of materials, because we know that especially with science content, it can be a little overwhelming. There are so many materials, little doodads for you to look at, right? Within K-5, we know that you have a lot of other things to teach. You have literacy block, you have math block. What time do you have for science, right? So we thought about that while we created this. So within K2, you only have 66 lessons per grade. So that's 3 really rigorous units where students are going to be able to step into the role of scientists, but these lessons are 45 minutes, right? And we kind of bump it up a little for grades 3 through 5. There are going to be 88 lessons, so 4 units, and these lessons are going to be 60 minutes long to allow students to have a little bit more time with this content. Teacher materials. We have so much for teachers to look at. So we have our amazing unit guides, teacher guides. All of these are available in Spanish. And then we have things like our classroom slides and our vocabulary walls and everything that you might need to use to put on the board. Absolutely everything, as well as all of the materials that you need to give to your students, such as Our investigation notebooks. Students can fill those out, rip out the pages. You can also print them out, whatever works for you. I know for me, I liked printing things out because I didn't want to lose students to lose anything. Then we also have our student books for K2. We also have big versions of those. We have all of our hands-on materials that are in our kits. And then for grades 2 through 5, we have our digital tools and simulations for grades 3 through 5. All that sounds a lot. It is a lot, and it's exactly everything that you might need to be able to teach science. Something else that we have that you'll be able to see a little bit if we have some time is the digital experience of Amplify Science. So this really allows you to go one step further and eliminate a lot of the tabs on your screens by just assigning things to students themselves. You're going to have one place where you can go into Educator Home, assign lessons, give students all of their high quality content without having to print out anything else. I'm going to make it super simple, and I'll show you a little bit about it later. Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about one specific unit. So today we're going to talk about a third grade unit called Balancing Forces, in which students have to learn about one specific train and see how is it floating? How is that working? So I'm going to show you a couple of lessons really quickly, right? We're not going to actually spend all 3 lessons. So that's a lot of minutes, right, to show you. But I need to skip to lesson 1.2 because lesson 1 is all of our pre-assessment, right? So let's talk about lesson 1.2, making an object move. So obviously still students are coming in with background knowledge, but we are not sure exactly how much they have yet. So we have to talk it out, right? We have to see what they're doing, how they're feeling. But let's actually look at the example and see this anchoring phenomena and what questions students might have.
The city of Faraday has arranged for a new train to come to Faraday. The citizens of Faraday were excited about having another way to get from place to place until they heard something about the train. It's a floating train. The people aren't sure what it means for a train to be floating, but it sounds strange. The mayor of Faraday is worried that people won't ride the train. She needs our help. The mayor has asked us to figure out a scientific explanation for how the new floating train works, so she can share that information with the citizens of Faraday.
Awesome. So I know a lot of you probably have met some third graders. I've taught third grade. And I think most third graders would think it's really, really cool that there might be a floating train because they've heard of things called hoverboards. They want to know, how does that work? How do we have a floating train? That's crazy. So within this lesson, students are really going to talk about it a lot, learn some routines. I don't want to go through all of these questions, right? We don't have too much time. And then we're really going to think about this unit question. What can make an object move or not move? Right? Sounds simple, but there's a lot to do and a lot to unpack. There are going to be multiple chapters within this unit to help students answer that question and that anchoring phenomena. Example, chapter 1, why does the train rise? Now we're going to have an activity. So that's part of our do within the do, talk, read, write, visualize approach to really allow students to have some hands-on investigation. Here's just an example of how students are doing that. Moving the blocks.
We are going to try and find ways to make these blocks move. In order to investigate safely, only move the blocks sideways along the floor or desk. One way to make the block move is to hook a rubber band on one end. Only stretch the band a little so the block doesn't move too quickly. Now you will try and make the block move yourselves. These are the materials you will be using in your investigations. Try different ways of moving the blocks, even if you aren't sure they will work.
So you can see this is really something that's going to grab the students' attention, kind of launch the unit, allow them to manipulate some blocks around and see, what do they already know about force and motion? We're going to learn some vocabulary that's really specific to help us go throughout the unit. And then we're going to use our investigation notebooks. I'm going to show you what this looks like within our digital experience in just a second. All right, so then we're going to share observations. This is also in our investigation notebooks, but students are going to be talking to each other while they do this. Let's jump into the next lesson. This lesson is going to be a really great example of our read, part of our do, talk, read, write, visualize approach, because we're reading forces all around. So within K-5, sometimes it can be a little difficult to access some texts that are nonfiction. So Amplify Science has these fiction texts that allow students to really dig deep into science content. Within Amplify Science, you're going to be able to launch into the library and just flip the pages digitally if you'd like, or you will have the big book, or you can have students read together, whatever works for them. You see with this lesson, they've already embedded that for you. And here's another lesson about explaining forces within the same chapter. This is really going to allow students to start their writing process and their argument process. All right. Ooh, so this is another do. You can see by this little hand motion right here. Students are going to be creating chain reactions. And to do that, here are some examples. Allow them to start thinking about what that means. And I know we are really rushing for time, so I want to get to our digital experience. And here's an example of how they can work together. They're going to just talk, move some things around, create some chain reactions. And now we've jumped into a new chapter. You can see that right there because it's lesson 2.1. And they're going to be thinking about this question even further. Another do. Here's our new chapter 2 question. Why does the train rise without anything touching it? We're going to have to collect some evidence, and we're going to use our digital tools to diagram something. You can see that right there. They're going to use drag and drop in order to do all of that. Just for the sake of time, I don't want to play this video, but it's just showing students how they can do everything on this digital diagramming tool. All right, so let's jump into our third chapter and talk about observing forces and chain reactions. We're going to watch a video about chain reactions. Unfortunately, the sound isn't working here, but this is a great example of chain reactions that I just love watching. So students love this because they are able to see, oh, one small thing really impacts everything and creates a chain reaction. It's very fun. But don't want to spend too much time on it right now. Awesome. So they're going to build a chain reaction together in order to help them get to the next chapter. And they are really going to start their arguments here because they are going to be doing our favorite hands-on lesson of the unit, which is creating a floating paperclip. So they're going to be building kind of what the floating train is doing all up by themselves and helping like a paperclip actually float and do it themselves. It's really cool. You'll see. Awesome. So you can see exactly what they have to build this. And before they actually get to build it, they're going to dive deeper into a nonfiction text explaining a bridge. And now they're going to be modeling the train by creating the floating paperclip. We got some diagramming right beforehand. And here we go. Let's look at this floating paperclip. If you can hear the audio here, that's great. But if not, you're really not missing out on anything. It's just some lovely elevator music. But you can see if you look closely that these two students are working together to create this floating paperclip. One is dragging it. One has the magnet up there. Oh no, it fell. Will they do it? Will they do it? Yeah, it fell. Let's try one more time. And you can see that it actually works right there, right before they pull it too hard and ruin it. But they're able to actually create the floating train by using this floating paperclip. All right. So now we actually have a chance to experience the digital experience. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just 1 second, and then we are going to go right into the program. All right. So right now you can see this is the digital version of exactly what we talked about, balancing forces. You can see our unit overview right here, all of the chapters. So we talked about chapter 1 all the way to chapter 5. And you can see our end of unit assessment here, our pre-assessment that we talked about. And let's just jump into a lesson. You can see all of our resources that we talked about too on the side. All right, let's go into a lesson we didn't talk about, just to make it more interesting. Hoverboard. Within this lesson, students are going to be reading another fiction text all about hoverboards. Students love this book. And you can see there are so many things here, including our printable lesson guide, so you don't have to go to the teacher's guide and find it there. You can also see multiple different buttons here. If you'd like to use the lesson slides and just create Google Slides there, you just click that button and it creates already made slides for you. You don't have to do anything, but you can also adjust them to whatever works for you. They are totally editable. You can also assign the lesson digitally with any SMS, LMS tools that we have, like Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, and you can assign it right on Amplify, or you can copy the lesson link and you can use Canvas, Schoology, anything like that. Lastly, I'm just making sure I don't miss anything. Oh, something I love to show people is that you can just toggle this right here. Things are in Spanish. Right now, these are teacher-facing things, so it probably won't have everything. Now, let's go into a lesson and actually teach it using the digital experience. Awesome. So within our digital experience, you can see all of our ready-made slides right here, but you have the teacher guide on the right. Every single thing that you might need as the teacher is already embedded for you. And you can see this is your view. Once you click Start Class, students will be able to see the lesson, and you will be able to see this in all of your notes and be able to go through the whole lesson that way. Let's go through this lesson really quickly. Reading hoverboard. And you can see that students are going to be reading this today. Ooh, but now we have our investigation notebook. Ooh, within our digital experience, students can complete these investigation notebook pages digitally. They can type it. They can also upload a picture. They can draw anything they'd like. Or let's say they can't really access that right now. You can just click talk and they can record their response and just click done and add it. Also here, you can click view work as the teacher and see every single student. Obviously, I'm the only student in this fake class right now. And you can see all of their work all at once in real time. You can see right here, getting started to read. Here's another investigation notebook page. And you can see we keep going with this lesson. But if I wanted to find this text, all I had to do was go into the library and find it by clicking hoverboard. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it.